Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. Um, Interesting week. Usually that's always the case, and it proves itself this week as well. So we'll start out with Dr. Lopkin. I'm sure our listeners would really like your take on is the red wave crashing, and are the polls correct in terms of we kind of agreed that the Congress is going to flip. By how much is another story, but the Senate is looking more precarious for Republicans, in part because they have some shitty candidates in Arizona and they have in Georgia with Herschel Walker among others. But what's your take on that?
At this point, it really is still up in the air. I mean, the House is pretty much a given. That's going to
Hmm.
go to the Republicans. The Senate is almost a coin toss. But what I find really interesting is that one of the major pollsters working for one of these companies came out and said that we should not be surprised if there is a much greater Republican turnout than the polls are suggesting, because the polls undercount Republicans. And now we've talked about this for years because we saw it in 2016 when the polls all said, "Oh, Hillary was going to win in a
In
landslide."
a landslide, yes. In fact, I left my office, and I believe CNN had a 98%, among others, chance of Hillary winning. It was a
Yeah,
done deal.
the polls said this was going to happen, and they all miscounted because they have been skewing Democrat and liberal for so long. Republicans and conservatives no longer even respond to the polls. And we just heard, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, the New York Times polling guru said that all of these places that are showing remarkable strength for the Democrats are places that the polls got wrong in 2020 and 2016. So
Yes,
I don't know that we can believe these polls
and
when the
I agree.
pollsters themselves are saying they're not accurate.
I wonder if they're not covering their ass. I think it's one of both. I also heard an interesting comment by Ari Fleischer that says, yes, there's registered voters and then there's voter voters. And I think it sounds stupid, but it's not, because I think there's a lot more enthusiasm, especially after Numbnuts, some of his inflammatory remarks and that crazy speech in Philadelphia, uh, that I think the Republicans have a lot more enthusiasm. So even sampling registered voters on top of the inherent bias um, points more towards a Republican victory or Republican victories.
Right.
So I think my read is if there's a Republicans is within 2 or 3 points, I would say that that's not certain, but it bodes well for the Republican candidate. Would you agree?
I think it does. I have a feeling that the Republicans are going to take the Senate. I don't know if it's going to be by a lot. It might just be by one seat.
One's good for me.
But there has been there have been indications that Mitch McConnell has been trying to woo Kirsten Sinema into switching parties. Now, whether or not she does, whether or not Manchin does, you have to look at the idea that they may very well vote with the Republicans whether or not the Republicans take the Senate.
Okay, then why
And
did they vote? But why did they vote Manchin and Cinema? Why did they vote for that piece of crap, the Green New Deal disguised?
well, actually that's the key to why they may vote with the Republicans. Manchin cut a deal with Chuck Schumer that he would vote with the Green New Deal, renamed the Inflation Reduction Act,
Hmm.
in return for Democrats supporting more energy infrastructure and drilling for more energy here in the US. And Chuck Schumer said, yes, they will support it. That was supposed to be in the budget agreement to stop the government shutdown. The progressives stripped it out. They would rather see the government shut down than agree to build more natural gas infrastructure in the United States. Well, this has to tell both Sinema and Manchin that the Democrats have just taken them for fools.
Yes, and they played him. They lied to him.
Yes,
Plus, Manchin in West Virginia, they're heavily dependent on coal and energy production. I think he's in big trouble.
it could be. I mean, I don't know enough about the local politics in West Virginia to say
Well,
if he
Trump
could lose his
Trump won
seat or
that
not.
state by like
Yes,
30 points. So
but
that's interesting. I think
I think because the Democrats double crossed them, I don't know that they'll actually switch parties, but there's a good possibility that the Democrats have lost their votes.
yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I think Manchin is desperately trying to redeem himself, so I think anything's possible. Um, a huge environmental calamity, the rupture of the pipeline methane. Your take on that? Was it an accident? Actually, there's a speech or there's a conversation where Biden alludes to the fact that he has the capability, he would take it out. What do you think? Again, he's hallucinating half the time anyway. But
I don't think Biden has the ability to take out his grandmother on a for dinner.
yeah, I
But
would agree with that.
to give our listeners a little background, we're talking about the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines. This is the pipeline that delivers Russian gas and oil to Europe. This is the pipeline that was blocked by sanctions by the Obama administration, blocked by sanctions by the Trump administration. And Biden went, oh, go ahead, you can use it. And he dropped the sanctions. Do I think this is sabotage? No. I think this is poor Russian construction. The same way they've got their entire infrastructure falling apart. And Biden
Corruption,
just
yes.
went ahead and said, "Yeah, go ahead. You can do it. We're going to stop our pipelines, which are much safer and deliver much cleaner energy, but you go ahead and fill your corroded pipelines with destructive, dirty oil and gas."
And plus, methane gas is leaking, which is a uber greenhouse gas. It
Yep.
makes carbon dioxide look like a joke.
Yeah, the methane that's being leaked by the Nord Stream pipelines will cause more effect to climate change than all of the cars in the US. That's how significant this is. And again, the Obama administration knew this was a bad idea. The Trump administration knew this was a bad idea. Biden, oh, go ahead. What do we care?
It's
So
certainly
all of his speech making about how we needed the Green New Deal, how we need green energy. Natural gas from the United States is the cleanest on the planet. He's stopping us from producing that, but allowing dirtier oil and gas to be produced by Russia, to be produced by the Arab nations. So all of his claims that he's fighting against climate change, it's complete bullshit.
100% bullshit. Natural gas, I'm surprised it's not more heavily utilized. It's almost pure in terms of very little emissions, if any. But yeah, again, he's a stooge, a puppet of other people, other forces, increasingly the far left, and increasingly day by day he's becoming more out of touch. You had that last week. He was roaming around a stage, I believe it was in Detroit. That was downright scary, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly no longer in control of his faculties. He's being manipulated by his handlers. He's said on numerous occasions, "Oh, I'm not allowed to do that. I'm not allowed to say that." Well, there's good reasons because they keep having to walk back everything he says.
Yes, sir, agreed. It's very interesting. In fact, I heard a couple of experts. One was actually a physician, believes that he has par- Parkinson's dementia from his gait, and then also how his cognitive ability has declined. And I wouldn't disagree. And I blame the media, I blame the Democratic Party, and I blame Doctor Jill Biden for willingly
Yeah,
knowing this
let's
and letting this happen.
well, again, as we say Dr. Jill Biden, let's not forget that her doctorate is a PhD in education. She
Yes,
has
with it.
no medical un, despite the fact that Whoopi Goldberg thinks she's such a good doctor, she should be the Surgeon General.
Yeah, we'll
It's
be a
like
high
Whoopi
school
Goldberg has
dropout.
right, has no idea that her doctorate's in education and not medicine.
And the other thing is how much of an ego. Okay, like getting like I got my MBA, whatever. Who cares? And four classes more and a dissertation, I would have been a. First of all, it's not the same as being a medical doctor, obviously. And then the ego, the gall. No, no. People that have PhD, they don't call themselves Doctor Sherman, Doctor Smith. Maybe on a business card, but Bob, Fred, Nancy. I mean, so really ridiculous. And by the way, Tucker actually did a deep dive on her dissertation. It was perplexing to say the least. Spelling errors, grammatical mistakes. Wow.
Yeah,
So anyway,
she's not the genius that she is being portrayed to be.
no, it was probably a favor to him, or he probably knowing him, they're so corrupt. He probably had something against the university, or did something to have her go through and become the great doctor, which he never did
Or
anything with, by the way.
or maybe they just bought the doctorate for her.
Yeah, you never know. With them, you never know. It's a crime syndicate family. Um, well, America over the last 3 years, obviously 2 years, has been going increasingly to the left, at least taking a snapshot on what's been going on. But Europe, in Italy, you have Maloney, and in the UK, you also have a more Thatcheristic prime minister. And my question is Europe going right? We're going left, or is it an indication that maybe the West has had enough of shit,
Well,
wokeness,
Europe
everything else?
has definitely turned to the right. Sweden also just elected a
Yes.
conservative leader. And the basic problem is if you listen to the progressives in the US, they all say the same thing. Oh, we're not talking about socialism like Venezuela. We're talking about socialism like what they're doing in Europe. Well, Europe is turning away from it because they can't afford it. Socialism, no matter how little, doesn't work because at some point you run out of other people's money to spend. And that's what's going on in Europe. They are facing strong fiscal problems because of spending on socialist problems. And this is not new. I mean, I highly recommend anybody who is pro socialist to actually watch The Crown on Netflix because this is all about the English royalty, but they spend some time showcasing the era where America had to bail England out because they did not have the money to keep their socialist programs going.
Yes, and it's also troubling and interesting that how I hope it doesn't happen in America. And again, there's no question that England or the UK could never have been, a superpower anymore. But if you look at their post-war governmental performance, except for Thatcher that tried to rescue it too little, too late. They just pissed away everything. The car industries, aviation industries, they're essentially not even a real world factor. I doubt they could do the Falklands War anymore.
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. And of course, the progressives here are pushing that agenda as, oh, this was such a great idea, when all you have to do is open your eyes and look. Although I'm starting to question if progressives are even capable of understanding facts and the truth. I happen to run into a progressive who's running for the local registrar of voters. And we were at a meeting, and of course he's promoting his own agenda. And now we had a wide range of political views at this meeting. This was not a political meeting, it was a business meeting. And this guy, one, was asked how the registrar works, and he couldn't answer. He didn't know how the election worked for the position he was running for. And he kept hitting, well, the reason I'm running is because the Republicans are trying to suppress the vote. Now, the Republicans are not trying to suppress the vote. Everybody in this particular town that has an ounce of intelligence knows that the Republicans were not trying to suppress the vote. What they were trying to do was to save money by streamlining the number of election sites that had to be run on election day. The far left Democrats ran with this, going, "Oh, it's suppression. It's suppression." Most of the Democrats knew this was not suppression, but the left wingers went along with it. And this guy actually said, well, I just spoke with someone from the Biden administration, and they are saying that the Republicans are trying to suppress the voter turnout in 30 states. Again, the Washington Post gave this argument for Pinocchios. It is an outright lie, and yet the Democrats keep pushing it.
Well, isn't part of that their modus operandi is just like Joseph Goebbels, just repeat the big lie, and often enough, and with as much vigor as possible, and people start believing it. Even Biden actually was giving a speech about January 6th and talked about the five cops or four cops that were killed. There were no cops killed.
Yeah, no cops were killed on January 6th. They also keep going, oh, well, Trump had a rally and everybody was doing the Nazi salute. No, one faked photo or out of context photo was taken when people were doing the wear number one symbol. And the Democrats keep, Hillary Clinton has been on the media saying, "Oh, they're becoming Nazis." It's like, no, stop the lies. If you had a platform to run on, you wouldn't have to keep lying about this stuff.
Well, I think that's your biggest point, or the biggest point, is that first of all, what does it say about what they think of their voting constituency? I mean, when everyone in the world is Hitler, don't you want to kind of maybe take a second and think, well, maybe that's a little excessive or possibly not accurate? I mean, and it loses when you're really going to have a fascist tyrant. It's going to lose any kind of credibility. It's like racist, racist.
It's
Eventually,
well,
you like tune out.
it has already lost credibility. In the past week, there have been a number of Democrats who have come out and said point blank, if you have to compare your political opponent to Nazis, you have already lost.
Well, that's interesting. Oh, we talked about Europe, that Maloney in Italy, she's very strong on family, protecting the borders. Somehow, in the liberal democratic, mind, that's fascist
Oh, yes, how dare you put your family first?
and national interests first. If you're not into open borders, wokeism, then you're a fascist.
Absolutely. And of course, now the Biden administration is being hung by his own petard because they keep repeating, oh, the border is secure, the border is secure. Meanwhile, fentanyl is flooding over the border. We have reached the point where 300 people a day are dying because of fentanyl overdoses. When COVID was killing 300 people a day, we shut down the entire country. And he won't even shut down the border to keep these drugs from coming in.
Okay, I think personally, and obviously I want your comment on this. Number one, it shows you that lunch pail Joe. We talked about this with the Afghanistan debacle. You know, lunch pail Joe, Amtrak Joe is not this nice guy. He's a mean son of a bitch. Okay, he's always been. Now with dementia, he's even worse. Second of all, it shows you that Democrats and the left will put our national sovereignty and security behind their own agenda, in this case, open borders. And I would
Yes,
last
and
thing is
that's what
last
they're
thing is I
doing.
do think this is big enough at 300 a day. It is going to bite him in the ass.
It's going to, because all of a sudden, you know, the Republicans have been yelling this for 18 months that every state is now a border state. Well, now you're seeing the consequences. You've got sanctuary cities going, oh, we can't actually handle 100 migrants. Meanwhile, they expect the border towns in Texas and Arizona to handle thousands per day. You've got fentanyl flooding over. Now you've got drug dealers hiding fentanyl in nerds and sweet tarts boxes so that they can give them to get kids, hooked and eventually just kill them. I mean, I don't understand what the motivation of the drug dealer is for killing their own customers, but that's what's going on. And at this point, honestly, I think the only way Biden is going to pay attention, and let's face it, this is actually a strong possibility of happening,
If
is
Hunter
when
takes some,
Hunter, yes, if Hunter dies because his heroin was spiked with fentanyl.
aren't we going to be losing a national icon though?
Oh,
Hunter.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
would be such a tragedy for Hunter to go away.
Biden said he was the smartest person he knows. And
Yeah,
and
but
on
look
the
at the
Hunter, that
people
was one of
Biden
the.
look at the people Biden knows.
You know something? I think he's not actually lying, considering who
He
he
might not
surrounds himself.
be.
Yeah, you got Camilla. She's another astrophysicist, so that could be happening. Speaking of Harris, she's going to the DMZ in in South Korea. Again, a real great opportunity, and it'll be really good for Carnivore Bites because you know there's going to be something comical coming out, like
Yeah,
something like
every
the demilitarized zone is demilitarized. That means it doesn't have a military. There'll be something good, and I'm sure North Korea is going to be quaking in their boots. They're going to be
every
shitting in
time
their pants.
every time she goes somewhere, she comes back foot securely in mouth. I have no doubt that it will happen again. Maybe the Democrats, if they really want to win this election and possibly the 2024 election, they need to convince both Biden and Harris that they have continuous infections from COVID and they need to be isolated so that everybody else can do the work and these two idiots can stop talking.
Well, actually, that's not so far from the truth. He won an election that way. Plus, he
Yeah,
actually had a slight bump in the polls. I think that's negated now when he had the double COVID. And there's actually conspiracy theories that thought he never got it the second time, but it worked so well the first. Why not run with it?
exactly. I've seen at least a dozen political cartoons saying that that's what the Democrats need. Remember, when the Democrats in the media were saying, oh, we're on the upswing, this has been the Biden administration's best week ever, it was the week that Biden was isolated and wasn't opening his mouth.
Now, let me ask you a serious question on that. Do you think that bump or the ride is over? I do.
Oh yeah, the bump ended fairly quickly. In fact, Jen Psaki, after being press secretary and lying through her teeth to cover for her boss, came out and said on MSNBC, if this election is a referendum on Biden, the Democrats lose.
I love that. That's true loyalty.
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes to show that she knew she was lying when she was press secretary. She knew she was spinning bullshit.
And she knew how incompetent he was because obviously they had
Yes.
to have some degree of interface, and they knew the guy's sitting with an ice cream cone, probably shitting on his desk or whatever, and babbling nonsense. And she knows she's probably subconsciously thinking this can't happen for another 4 years. And as all Democrats
I
probably
don't
want him out of there.
I don't even think it's subconscious. I think that's why she left, because she could not keep lying to the American people. She knew what she was saying was wrong. And, when you do that long enough, it eats away at your soul. And I think she finally just went, I can't do this anymore. I'm out of here. I have to leave the administration. Now, of course, we won't see that with Jean Pierre because she doesn't have the intelligence to know she's lying.
Yes, or any marketability. She might make Channel 3 possibly like weekend edition when they go to like, like a little petting zoo or something like that, but she's got no marketability in terms of major media. And Jen Psaki, when you go to MSNBC, that's not exactly like playing for the New York Yankees.
No, it's not. But for liberals, that's becoming the only real game in town because CNN is now actually starting to news again, and they're restaffing. Politico magazine, they were bought out. They went, you know what? We can't keep pulling this. We actually have to report the news as it's happening. And you're starting to see liberal media fall apart, not in favor of conservative media, which is a good thing, but actually in favor of telling both sides of the story and sticking to the facts. And
I
if we could get the majority of media to do that, we would be in a much better place.
Well, look at what they brought us. The whole dossier, which was a bunch of shit, and they knew it was. Uh, Protecting Biden, someone that's pretty much got stage 5, if there is such thing, dementia, to the country's detriment and
Right. I
serious
mean, and
consequences.
it's it's not just about how they cover, it's about what they cover. Up until Governor Abbott, and I forget the governor's name in Arizona, but until they started sending migrants to New York and Washington, D.C., the mainstream media didn't cover the border. They pretended it wasn't happening.
Oh yeah, I agree, and I do think it has huge ramifications, even if they're neutral. Getting some of the things like Hunter Biden, the border crisis out there for all eyes to see, it could have real detrimental effects on the Democratic electoral possibilities. Because I think once people know, because when it's hidden. Then it's about fear. You're a Nazi, you're this, you're that. When people know the actuality of what's going on, I think it has huge ramifications. Your thoughts?
It does have huge ramifications, and you're going to start seeing it, I'm going to guess January, because Governor Gavin Newsom has made it clear that he wants to be president. Well, guess what? If he wants to be president and he keeps going out there and making speeches, the media is going to have to show what he did to California and what these liberal policies have actually created.
Do you think
And that's
CNN is capable of that? Honestly, I'm asking it now. Do you think they're
C-
positioned now
CN
to do that?
CNN, I think, is not yet, but they're getting in position to
Good.
do that. Fox is definitely in a position to do that.
Newsmax.
MSNBC will never admit to it.
Well, let me ask
Newsmax
you
will
one
do it.
question.
But I think also the broadcast networks are starting to see. I mean, turning them is like turning an aircraft carrier. It's going to take forever, but they're starting to realize they can't just cover their asses anymore, and they can't cover for the Democrats because they have to report on crime. They have to report on fentanyl deaths. And these are things that it's getting harder and harder to cover up.
Wait a second. You have an amazingly great point because it's not a proactive approach; it's a reactive approach because these stories are so huge. It's committing editorial malpractice, so they have to. 300 a day,
Exactly.
you have to cover that.
And that's what's going on. And you're seeing it more, not even at the national level, but on the local news. When you have local news in New Orleans, in Philadelphia, in New York, reporting about murders day after day after day, at some point you have to look at the national networks and go, what, how can you say these policies are working? We just saw the local news what it's doing here. The New York Times has not been reporting on the effects of inflation in the economy and the effects of crime. However, they can't get their own reporters to come back to the office because it's too expensive for them to commute in, and it's too dangerous.
Oh,
So,
well,
but
very interesting. It's not the news media, but something I believe they had to report is when the CEO of McDonald's has a news conference saying that he can't attract anyone to work for McDonald's. I'm talking in corporate because Chicago's just too dangerous. You got to report
yes,
that.
and Mayor Lightfoot came out and said, "Oh, he's misinformed,"
Oh
and
yeah,
the media just laughed at her. It's like, no, he's not misinformed. He's telling you what's going on. So as these problems get more and more severe, the media is being forced to report on them.
I would agree. Well, we talk about the election of Democratic candidates around the country, and obviously in the last election, a contributor to that financially as well as editorially was Zuckerberg, and he's been rewarded for his great efforts. But now he's out of the top 10 richest people in America or the world. I'm not sure, but he's out of the top 10, and I can't cry enough.
Well, he has to blame his good buddy Joe, because most of Zuckerberg's wealth was not money, wasn't cash, it was in Facebook stock. Well, guess what? Stocks have been tumbling. They have been in bear territory. They have lost 20% of their value just this year. I think it's more since Biden took office. Now, imagine your financial situation if you suddenly had 20% less money. That is the result of what is going on. That is
I
the
got to
result
interject
of
one
the
thought that
inflation.
I got to interject one thought about that, and love your opinion on it. The financial statements, people's financials, the 401k statements, will be coming out essentially at the end of this month and in October. I think it's going to have an impact on turnout and some of these tight races. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. When Democrats see that their retirement savings has just plummeted by 20%, and let's face it, people will say, "Oh, well, most people don't have a retirement plan." Union members make up the core of the Democratic Party, and every union member has a union pension that is invested in the stock market and has lost value. So there is a huge chunk of core Democratic voters that Biden's policies are about to take a chunk out of their retirement.
I think it's even more impactful that you have the soccer moms and the if you call it swing voters, independent voters, the suburban vote that's really critical to any election. They do have 401ks, and it's different when you hear about
Yes.
it on CNBC or Fox Business that the stock market's crapping out. It's completely different when you open up that little letter, that envelope, and then you have then basically you shit your pants because when you thought you were going to retire in 2 years, well, guess what, honey? I don't think so.
And this is not going to go away because even the economists who are denying that we're in a recession now are saying, oh, well, we expect to see a recession in 2023. So
Oh,
this is not going to change.
I would
This is
agree, Dr. Lopkin. And also, people don't remember because a lot of people weren't born then or weren't alive then. The 70s, you had essentially 10 years, the stock market was completely flat or down. I mean, 10 years. I'm talking from 1973 to 1980 or 1982, it was completely flat.
And there have been predictions of a recession that bad. Now, I actually don't think we're going to see a recession that severe.
No, I'm
Um,
talking about the stock market performance
oh, yes.
from 73 to 82 was essentially flat. So you actually lost, given the high inflation, you could have been losing 12% a year.
Oh, absolutely. And again, right now, given inflation, wages are not keeping up with inflation. So you're losing money there. If you have investments in the stock market, you're losing money there. And we actually, on our sister podcast, Raw Naked Truth, had a conversation with fellow Carnivore alum Chris Calandra. And we're talking about the fact that the markets are in a very strange position because usually when stocks go down, bond values go up, gold value goes up. We are actually seeing values in all of it go down. So there are some small safe havens, but not the traditional ones that people have depended on.
There's nowhere to run. You are correct. Speaking of Biden and his ability to be the great uniter, I think his mentor and his professor was really Barack Obama, who never missed an opportunity to inject racism into whatever he was, police behaving badly, you name it. Um, Basically had a comment that people that oppose the migrant invasion have the underlying racists. Again, the great uniter.
Well, again, that's the Democratic platform. It's been that way for well over a decade at this point. If you don't agree with us, it's because you're a racist.
That's when
And
you don't
yes,
have an
it
argument.
started right, it started during the Obama administration. And I will never forget reading an article in the Hollywood Reporter where Ed Asner and Mike Farrell, two far left activists, talked about the fact that they did not like Barack Obama's policies, but they would not do anything about it. They would not confront him about it. They would not campaign against it because they did not want to be labeled racist. So that's what the racist argument is supposed to do. It's supposed to shut the opposition down. You can't say anything because you're a racist. Well, guess what? They've been doing it for so long, it's lost all meaning. And now that's why I think they moved on to fascist because they lost that racist didn't stop anybody anymore because they called everybody a racist. So people went, all right, you don't know what you're talking about. Now it's fascist, it's fascism because
I,
they need something to shut down the argument because they can't win on the facts.
no question about it. Because also we talk about the media. Part of that problem, or some of the roots of the problem, is they've never had to be challenged because you had willing media, basically never never challenging it, never asking questions. Those days are kind of drawing to a close. So again, what are you going to do? I wonder if the whole fascist thing might blow up as well. But we will see. Um, in the global initiative, the war in Ukraine, obviously Putin has instituted conscription, and Russian men are fleeing to avoid that, and as well as I believe it's the American embassy has said to Americans in Russia that they need to leave. That's a little ominous.
It's very ominous. And I think, yeah, Russians are fleeing because, one, they don't believe in the war in Ukraine. This is Putin's war, not Russia's war. But more importantly, think about this. You are being drafted to fight in a war you don't believe in. But even past that, the man who is drafting you is saying he will use nuclear weapons. Well, who do you think is going to be on the battlefield when those weapons go off? Do you
Yeah.
want to be there when your own side is bombing your placement with nuclear weapons?
Is this the end of Putin?
I believe it
Has he
is.
backed himself, the great strategist, the great chess player? Has he backed himself into the proverbial corner?
He backed himself into a corner. I think even China at this point is going, yeah, we said we had a special relationship, but you're
We're getting a
just
divorce.
crazy. Yeah, you're just crazy. We don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah, and plus
Now,
his military has been kind of the man behind the curtain, or the emperor has no clothes, whatever euphemism you want to use. It's been kind of like not the we always thought economically they were second rate, but militarily, even with the denigration after the Cold War, Putin was supposedly building up his military. They've proven really ineffective, very impotent in the battlefield.
yeah, I mean, realistically, what you have here is a repeat of what you saw in Afghanistan. When Russia went into Afghanistan, we were funneling weapons to the Mujahideen, and Russia underestimated the Mujahideen's willingness to fight and willingness to die for their country. And that's what you have in Ukraine. They thought, oh, the Ukrainians are going to welcome us as liberators because they want to be part of Russia again. No, nobody wants to be part of Russia again.
No, no, that's probably pretty much one of the last on the list, I would say. We did allude to the fact in terms of upcoming recession. Well, one of the big drivers, I think a third of the economy is indirectly or directly related to housing and mortgages. The mortgage rate just jumped to 6.2%, highest since '08. One of the big drivers of this robust or previous robust economy was a super uber strong housing market. Many experts think that's on the way out as well. Your comments?
Yeah, you're going to see the housing market contract. First time home buyers are already finding homes too expensive. You're going to see the price drop. As prices drop, you're going to see fewer people selling because the whole reason they were selling is because they could get, oh, great deals for their house. So, yes, you're going to see the housing market contract. It's part of what happens during a recession. As inflation goes up, people aren't going to be as willing to make house payments. So
Oh,
that is
and plus, wait a
unfortunately a
second,
snowball.
with interest rates, talk about a snowball effect. I agree. Interest rates go up 2%. That's like a huge ramifications for the increase in people's mortgages. It's huge, and over the course of the lifetime of 30-year mortgage, it is amazing amounts of money. And people that were, let's say, you know, close, on the edge, not I'm talking about, buy or not to buy. That's real, and that's why the rental market is exploding. it's gone down over the last month, but it has certainly exploded because of the increased housing costs, among other things. And then I guess Dr. Lopkin, we have a final kind of a bit of information in terms of what's going on, and that is, you look at the overall state of the enthusiasm with Biden. How do you see that playing out as the midterms approach?
Honestly, I don't think enthusiasm on the Democratic side is going to be as big as the media is making it out to be. The fact of the matter is, the people who are really enthusiastic are diehard Democrats. They were, or far left liberals. Yes, they do have enthusiasm, but these are the folks that weren't going to switch parties anyway. These are the folks that their vote was a given. And, I find it absolutely amazing that even even liberal states don't think there's going to be that much enthusiasm. And as evidence, I point to a commercial that is being run by the Connecticut State Registrar about absentee ballots. And it's giving the deadlines how your ballot has to be in by November 8th, by election day. It can't be late or it won't be counted. But one of the things they keep saying in this commercial is if you are dropping off your ballot at a drop box outside of your town hall, you have till 8 p.m. on November 8th to drop it off. If you can drop your ballot off on election day at town hall, what did you need an absentee ballot
Oh no, I
for?
think the absentee ballots has been completely perverted. It used to be for special situations, military people, people that were totally, legitimately infirmed or too old. Now it's become a joke, and I think it's undermined our democracy. You have, in Pennsylvania, you could have started voting last week. Well, like we talked about before, Fetterman just uh, had a thing he was supporting certain gangs by you wearing their colors. I mean, if you already voted, I mean that's got to be problematic. I would like to actually close on this, Dr. Lopkin. It looks like there's a lot of unrest for that woman dying, being killed in Iran. Um, a lot of grassroots protests, not only in Iran but around the Middle East overall. How come just we don't hear anything from the Biden administration? I mean, nothing. It's like crickets.
Well, that's again, he backed himself into a corner because while these protests are going on, he's still trying to make a deal with Iran. Well,
How bizarre is that?
he can't make a deal and say, well, you should, what happened was horrific, which it was. It just goes to show how out of touch the Biden administration is with what's actually going on around the world. Israel has told the Biden administration it's a bad idea to go back into this deal. Half of the countries in the Middle East have said this is a bad idea. We are negotiating with Russia because Iran won't even talk to us directly. This is a sign that you need to back away from this and
Well,
start holding Iran and Russia accountable for their actions.
I would agree, and I think in closing, I think it shows unbelievable weakness and stupidity that's not only heard in Iran, but it's heard around the world. Dr. Lopkin, great show, and we're on any platform that people are interested or normally access their podcast. We're on, aren't we, Dr. Lopkin?
We are. You can find every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com/podcasts, as well as the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible. and any platform that respects freedom of speech. And before we go, just one last thing. We just got an alert that as we're recording this, Hurricane Ian has made landfall in Florida. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the people of Florida.
And it's huge. It's a category 4 and on the cusp of being a category 5. Thank you very much, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.